I never thought that a simple red pair of panties would turn my peaceful life upside down. My marriage to my wife Lisa seemed solid, yet it crumbled overnight. On a Monday morning, Lisa was listless, and I faced mockery and provocation at my workplace. It all stemmed from a Saturday night party I missed. But Lisa became the center of attention. Colleague Mitchell's taunts and the red panties thrown at me hinted at Lisa's infidelity. But should I believe it? My heart struggles between anger and doubt, and the truth seems increasingly blurry. Let's formally listen to today's story of infidelity. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for your support. Mondays were never my favorite day of the week. Today's shaping up to be one of the roughest days yet. My wife, Lisa, appeared unusually downcast and gloomy. She went through the motions of preparing breakfast for me and the boys, but it was as if she were on autopilot. She wasn't being mean, just down in the dumps. It did not exactly set a positive tone for the morning. I couldn't figure out what was bothering her, and I really didn't want to probe my sons. Daniel, 16, and Eric, 18, went to school around the same time. I left for work. For the past 15 years I've worked at a freight company loading and unloading container ships. It's hard work, but the pay is decent. I've always wanted to go out to sea and explore different parts of the world. It's a deep-seated passion of mine, and it sometimes makes me sad because I know it may never come true. Family has always been important to me, and I am content with my current situation. I have 2 wonderful sons and a loving wife, whom I treasure. But then there's Monday Day, which is my least favorite day of the week. The worst part of my job is dealing with certain co-workers, particularly Mitchell Frell, who is constantly causing trouble with his buddies, Aaron Rivers, Benjamin Daniels, and Nicholas Foster. We've known each other since high school, and I've never really cared about them. And I still don't. Mitchell wasted no time in stirring up trouble today, mentioning a party on Saturday night that I missed because I was helping my father move out of his Chester home. My mother passed away 6 months ago, so my father decided to downsize. I encouraged Lisa to go to the party without us, but when she returned, she simply said it was fine. I gave Mitchell a glare and remained silent. Ethan, I'm sorry you couldn't join us. But thank you for sending your wife. She brought a lot of energy to the party. He smirked. My fists clenched as I heard his group cackle like a pack of hyenas, apparently enjoying a private joke. At my expense, Mitchell followed me as I started walking away, continuing to mock me. Ethan, your wife has grown into quite the beauty since high school. He jeered. You are a lucky man to have her waiting for you at home every night. I knew it was going to be a tough day. My forehead veins bulged and my neck muscles tightened. Throughout my life I'd struggled to control my temper and avoid confrontation. I turned away again, but Mitchell was not finished. He threw something my way, a soft red pair of panties. Lisa left them behind on Saturday. She might need them to match the red bra she was wearing. He snickered, eliciting laughter from the others. I stood there and refused to pick up the red silk that had fallen to the ground. I realized I had stopped breathing when I felt my stomach muscles tense. I was a tightly wound spring of rage, ready to snap. I knew I could handle any of them, but confronting them all at once seemed intimidating. I didn't care. Right then I began moving toward them, prepared to confront them, when a large hand grabbed my shoulder. Scott Anderson, the foreman, met my gaze and silently gestured toward the main office. I threw a fierce glare at the group. I followed Scott up the stairs with a burning hatred in my heart. Their laughter abruptly ceased and was replaced by worried expressions. Inside Jonathan Clerk's office, I sat opposite his secretary. Sir, Ethan, do you want a cup of coffee? She offered no thanks. I replied, I'm too upset to hold a cup right now. Through the glass partition, I could see Scott and Jonathan having a serious discussion. Sir, did you attend the party on Saturday night? I inquired. She simply nodded in agreement. Can you explain what happened? I'm completely clueless and Lisa hasn't said anything. I pressed. Emma paused, hesitant to speak. Ethan, I really should not get involved. This is something you should talk about with your wife. She evaded. But Emma, you were present. You saw everything. Please give me a hint. I pleaded. Emma shuffled papers on her desk, clearly attempting to avoid the conversation. Please. Let me know, I insisted. Well, Lisa arrived at the party looking stunning. But after about an hour, Mitchell began pushing drinks on her. She finally admitted that she appeared to be enjoying herself. Mitchell would whisper to his friends every time he got more drinks and they'd all laugh. After about 30 minutes, Lisa and Mitchell disappeared into the back storeroom. Aaron, Benjamin, and Nicholas followed them. We didn't see any of them for an hour, but then they all came back laughing and joking. Lisa smiled, but she appeared disheveled. Her hair was messed up and her dress was wrinkled. Around 10 minutes later, Lisa and Mitchell left together. Thank you. Ugh. I didn't want to hear that, but it makes sense, I explained. We sat in silence for an additional 10 minutes. Then Scott came out and motioned for me to enter. Ethan, I'm not happy with what happened this morning, he said. Mitchell, Benjamin, Aaron, and Nicholas all received off without pay. I'm giving you 2 weeks of vacation. I heard about what happened on Saturday and I'm assuming this is news to you. I can't let anyone get hurt. I don't blame you for anything, but I expect you to resolve things before returning. I'll do whatever I can to help you get through this now. Get out of here, he concluded. As I left the office, I thanked Jonathan and Emma with a nod. Mitchell and his crew were nowhere to be seen. As I approached the parking lot, I left the panties on the dock and chose not to return home. Instead, I drove north hoping to find solace. It gave me plenty of time to think about the past and present. Lisa and I were classmates in high school. She was large, overweight and unkempt, not exactly conventionally attractive. She lacked grooming skills and did not know how to use makeup. Her hair was always a mess and she didn't fit in with any of the popular groups. So she was a bit of a social outcast. Ironically, that is what attracted me to her. I was a big guy, standing at 6'3" and weighing nearly 3 pounds. I was also awkward, shy and not particularly attractive. Sports were not my thing because of my clumsiness. Mitchell Frell, on the other hand, was completely opposite. He was attractive, charismatic and athletic. There were rumors that girls wanted Mitchell to be their first experience. Despite not having a consistent girlfriend, he always had a date. I could not stand him. He would brag about his conquests and the girls seemed impressed. Then there was Lisa. She hoped Mitchell would take her out so she could claim him as her first. Mitchell, on the other hand, not only rejected her, but also humiliated her in public by telling everyone about it and calling her derogatory names. The school thought it was amusing, but Lisa was devastated. I saw this as an opportunity to step in because I was unfamiliar with the dating scene. I decided to simply be friendly with Lisa. We grew close quickly and by the end of high school we were dating. After school I got a job in construction. Within 1 year I shared my excess weight and grew muscular and fit. It felt great not to be a laughing stock anymore. Lisa and I married within a year. Our sons, Daniel and Derek, arrived shortly after and Lisa began hitting the gym. Her transformation was amazing. She learned how to style her hair, apply makeup properly and dress to impress. She looked stunning and I was proud to call her my wife. I adored her before her makeover and now she looked like a princess. When I got the job at the loading dock, our lives improved dramatically until today. As I drove down the A1 highway, I knew where I was going. It was simply a matter of time. I couldn't help but think of our 2 sons. They came from solid stock and demonstrated it. We made sure they stayed active so they wouldn't become couch potatoes like we were. Eric was slightly taller and leaner, whereas Daniel had large hands and muscular arms. Both were in good shape and capable of caring for themselves. We taught them the value of self-control and not being bullies. Both of them had the same dream of sailing the seas. I suppose it runs in the family. I promised to support them in whatever they chose to pursue. Lisa was an excellent mother and a lovely wife. She managed the household well and avoided wasting money on frivolous items. Our intimate relationship was satisfying. Or so I thought. We had fun during our intimate moments, and I was satisfied with that aspect of our relationship. I found myself driving down the M6, still covering miles. The shadows lengthened, and I hoped to arrive at my destination before nightfall. It was a 7-hour journey to Port Patrick, but that was the only place I wanted to be. At the turn, I kept an eye out for the A75 and eventually spotted it as the sun went below the horizon. There were plenty of parking spaces near the Duke's Inn at this time of year. I handed the bartender my keys and asked for a room for the week. I had no luggage, a change of clothes or a razor, but I didn't care. He took the room key from the rack, handed it to me, and hung my car keys in the same location. I grabbed a pint and sat in the back corner. The amber light from the street lamp filtered through the bottle glass window next to me. It was time to numb myself and forget about everything. I would frequently awaken in my room late at night with only vague memories of how I had arrived. Usually one of the locals would help me up the stairs and place me on the bed. I never bothered getting under the sheets. I splashed water on my face and took several showers. However, because I had to put on the same clothes afterward, the shower provided little relief. I noticed my beard was growing rapidly. I'd never let it grow before, and seeing it in this state was unsettling. Every few days they swiped my credit card to keep my bill current. I'd been wallowing in self-pity for quite some time and was growing tired of it. Sitting there, lost in thought, I glanced over at the dartboard for what seemed like the 1000th time. When two cops entered, I observed them without actually looking at them. They talked with the bartender for a while, and he gestured toward me. He also pointed to my keys, which were hanging on the wall behind him. I assumed they were looking for me. I was impressed with my own deduction. They didn't bother attempting to engage me in conversation. Instead, they kept refilling my coffee for the next several hours. "Ethan White, could we speak with you? Did I do something wrong?" I asked. "We only need to talk. Are you ready for it? Shall we go outside the sun?" "Sure." But everything was dim. The cobblestones on the street and the floor of the pub were both slippery. So I took my time crossing to the C.W. wall. The entire street was sloped, and I still felt unsteady. I inhaled the FRFI air, which felt wonderful. I didn't smoke, but the air inside felt so heavy that I did. I leaned over the granite C.W. wall and vomited. It was mostly liquid. Because I had not eaten much solid food in the previous few days, my head began to clear, as did my vision. My two companions waited patiently while I composed myself. I began to feel guilty about causing them so much trouble. The bench I sat on was wet, but I didn't care. "So what can I do for you, gentlemen?" I asked. "First and foremost, we have been looking for you since you went missing 10 days ago. Second, we've been trying to find Mitchell Fair LL, and we're hoping you could help us." They explained, "So you found me. So that part has been resolved." I haven't seen Mitchell Fair LL since the day I arrived here. The bartender has most likely already told you this. I haven't moved since I checked in. I'm not sure where Mitchell is, but I'll probably go look for him when I get home. I talked with them for another hour. They had nothing to charge me with, and once they discovered I was safe, they seemed more interested in talking about Mitchell. They tracked me down using credit card charges. If that situation arises again, I will remember not to make that mistake. I went downhill and purchased some new clothes and a toothbrush. I decided to keep the beard for a while, despite how bad it looked. After a final shower, I paid my bill and went home. I stopped about 4 times along the way. I grabbed a bite to eat twice, but mostly I was trying to put off getting home. There was nothing pleasant or enjoyable waiting for me there, but I was eager to see my boys. She sat on the couch. Only one light was turned on in the living room. She watched me with her hands in her lap, afraid to move. It appeared that she had been crying, but it was difficult to tell in the dim light. I wanted a beer, but the thought of it made me uneasy, so I chose a soda instead. I settled into the recliner across from her and waited for her to speak up. "The boys are spending the night at a friend's place," I suggested it, "so we could spend some time alone chatting. Why didn't you let me know before I found out?" "I do not know. I suppose I was scared." "What exactly are you scared of?" "I wasn't sure how you'd react to what you do." "I made a foolish decision and it did not turn out well." "It didn't turn out well." "What do you mean?" "Ethan, you're not going to get mad, are you?" "I am not sure. It's probably best to tell the truth, but let us see. Ethan, do you remember what Mitchell did to me in high school?" "Yeah. I've wanted to get back at him for that since Saturday night at the party. I thought it was the right time, so I set a trap for him." "That isn't what I heard. Hear me out, Ethan. As I previously stated, things did not go according to plan. I dressed nicely and Mitchell began flirting with me. I let him think he was making progress and he suggested we go to the storeroom. We kissed briefly because I needed to play along to set him up. After a while, he was touching my chest over my bra, so I removed my panties and teased him with them to ensure that he was aroused." "Why did you do that? What were your thoughts?" "I want to get back at him. I expected him to pay for embarrassing me anyway." I noticed that he was excited, so I told him to remove his pants so we could have some fun. He did, and then I did something girls are not supposed to do, all right. "What on earth were you doing?" I laughed as I pointed to one of his staff members as I mocked him about his size. I told him it was a sorry excuse for a manhood and that no one with such a tiny thing would be able to touch me. He began to shrink, eventually becoming completely limp. It was a mean thing to do, but it felt right in the moment. "Keep going." I collected myself and went to the door to leave. Aaron, Benjamin, and Nicholas were waiting outside. Mitchell apparently told them they could take a turn after him, and they were patiently waiting. I walked past them and went to the restroom laughing as I returned to the party. They all stood around with smug grins on their faces. They had apparently spread the rumor to everyone at the party that they had been with me in the storeroom. They claimed it was retaliation for me humiliating Mitchell. I got upset and left. "I heard you went with Mitchell." "That is not true. I left alone and drove directly home." "Did you leave your underwear for Mitchell?" "No, I simply forgot them when I left." "Why haven't you told me?" "After they twisted everything, I became terrified. I didn't know how to describe it to you, so you let me figure it out on my own. In front of all my coworkers, I felt foolish. It felt like I was being cheated on. They teased me about what had happened and I was unable to respond because I did not know the truth. I needed to learn from a secretary. Her version does not exactly match yours. She was not there. I was. What I told you is exactly what happened." "Darn it, Ethan. I am your wife. You were supposed to defend and support me." Lisa started crying and entered the kitchen. I sat there with my soda, watching her lean against the Formica table and sob softly. I loved her more than anything. She was the only girl I had ever cared about. She was telling me a lot of lies and turning on the waterworks. Lisa devised a plan to save our marriage. Emma had absolutely no reason to lie to me. I felt compelled to start questioning the entire concept of marriage. Emma had absolutely no reason to lie to me. I wanted to grill Lisa on every inch of consistency in her story, but I decided not to. I couldn't change what had happened, and forcing Lisa to admit something she didn't want to would only make things worse. I wanted to know the truth, but she wasn't going to tell me. I decided to keep things as they were and let her relax. I took another shower and went to bed with my wife. She rested her head on my shoulder. She whispered that she loved me, and we both fell asleep. I still had a few days off before returning to work. The boys were pleased to see me, but they maintained a respectful distance. I suggested a trip to London, and they quickly agreed. Lisa appeared pleased that the men in her family were bonding on the drive to London. I learned that the boys had both been suspended for fighting, which we strongly opposed in our household. They reluctantly explained that they were being teased about their mother's behavior at the party and decided to stop it. Some boys with big mouths got bloody noses and black eyes. They did not tell their mother about the suspension. but they did ask me about what happened at the party. I postponed our conversation. We visited the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency and I requested 3 applications. The boys were thrilled. It took an hour to finish the paperwork. I had all of the necessary documents, including birth certificates and passports. Following a brief interview, they handed us medical forms that would be completed by a doctor. We went to Wagamama for dinner and then returned home. We agreed not to discuss anything with their mother or friends. The physical exams were completed the next day, so all we had to do was wait. I've always adored Lisa. She was the only girl I ever loved, kissed or shared intimacy with. It was difficult for me to believe she could do something so low. I thought her actions were disgraceful and unforgivable. I was still willing to give her a chance if she could prove her story, but the chances appeared slim. By the end of the week she had made matters worse. Lisa had been very attentive, careful not to bring up the party or my trip to Port Patrick. She was working hard to put our lives back on track. The next morning during breakfast she dropped a bomb, "Ethan, I have been thinking I'd like to have another baby now." Let's put this into context. Lisa had been taking birth control pills for several years after the boys were born. About 3 years prior she stopped taking them due to the side effects. I won't go into detail, but she experienced health problems as a result of the pills. We were not using any other methods of birth control. Shortly after I went to the doctor for a shoulder issue. During the appointment I inquired about a vasectomy, and within 20 minutes I was sterile. I did not tell Lisa about it. I didn't see any reason to. For the previous 3 years, Lisa and I had been having unprotected contact without birth control, and she's never questioned why she has not gotten pregnant. She suddenly wants to have a baby, as if by magic. Either she's extremely naive or she believes I am. Her suggestion surprised me, but I went along with it because I am a man. I'm not a pregnancy expert, but since it had been nearly 3 weeks since the party, Lisa could have missed her period and was trying to conceal it. This made me reconsider my plans and I decided to change them. The boys were at school and I spoke with them before they left. They appeared to understand the situation with their mother better than I did. Having their support made me feel better, even though I had no idea what would happen next. I spent the majority of the day searching for Mitchell Thompson. He needed to be somewhere. During lunchtime, I spoke with Emma at the docks, but she had no information on Mitchell. There was talk that he was afraid I'd seek vengeance. It did not add up because I was usually calm. To avoid encountering my 3 tormentors, I stayed away from where they worked. Later that day I went to a local lawyer to begin the divorce proceedings with Lisa. I did not want to hurt her, but I couldn't keep living with her. With the boys about to be on their own, I didn't see any reason to stay. One issue I couldn't shake was the desire to thank Mitchell and his friends for destroying my marriage. I knew Lisa was mostly to blame, but I couldn't take it out on her. Her lovers needed to face the consequences of their actions. Nicholas Foster, one of them, would always stop by McMurray for a drink before heading home. It was dusk. When he walked out the bar's side door and toward his car in the back, I caught him off guard by grabbing and twisting his arm behind his back. I slammed him into a wall. He heard bones crack as his face came into contact with the brick. Despite his struggles, I held him down and began hitting his kidneys with my other fist. As he slumped, I continued to strike. He heard more bones break and his shoulder popped out of its socket. I threw him down onto the cobblestones as the crowd walked down the alley. Nobody pursued me as I walked calmly to my car and drove away. 2 hours later I arrived at the police station. Lisa had posted the house as collateral for bullying and was completing the paperwork. Alice Foster burst in yelling that she wanted to be locked up indefinitely. They managed to keep her away from me, but she continued to rant until Lisa intervened. I'm not sure what Lisa said, but Alice glared at us both and stormed out. Daniel and Eric took my car and drove me home while Lisa followed. The boys seemed proud of me, but I tried not to encourage them. Nicholas suffered a dislocated shoulder, a broken nose, to black eyes and other internal injuries that have yet to be fully assessed. Several ribs were broken. Unfortunately, none pierced his lungs. When my wife and I returned home, We didn't talk about the incident. I slept on the couch for the first time in 20 years and it did not bother me. The next morning I was up early trying to figure out my next move. The Osaka Maru was docked at Felix Dale. Captain Costa agreed to take me on if I organized my paperwork. I promised to get back to him later this week. On my way home, I paused to refuel. As I finished, I noticed someone rush towards me. I turned just in time for Benjamin Daniels to strike me on the left side with a 2x4. It grazed my left arm and cracked a few ribs. I struggled to breathe with my eyes closed. I couldn't take in any air and saw bright flashes of light before my knees gave out. The wooden club bounced on the pavement, making a strange, clunking noise. I let go of it after the impact. As I fell, my right hand instinctively reached for some flannel. I twisted to the left and slammed my right fist with the flannel into the ground. I landed hard on Ray's body, keeping my eyes tightly shut to block out the pain. In my left side, my left arm felt immovable. Acting solely on instinct, my right hand started hammering up and down. I didn't know what I was hitting, as long as it wasn't the SAS pult. Both sides of my body appeared to function independently. With my left side curled up for protection, my right side would attack anything it could find. Benjamin wriggled beneath me, attempting to escape, but he soon lay motionless. I continued to hit him until some bystanders intervened. Breathing remained difficult and the pain was intense. A medic administered a shot and I fell asleep. On our way to the hospital, I awoke a few hours later with my left arm in a sling and my body tightly taped. Breathing became easier, but still required caution. Lisa was present, looking displeased. "Ethan, what on earth were you doing?" she exclaimed. "You made quite the scene over that minor party issue." "Sorry, honey," I responded. "I did not do anything. Why did your friend attack me with a 2.4? What's this about a small party issue? I need a better explanation for what happened that Saturday," I insisted, "or I'll keep asking around." "You weren't just asking," Lisa replied. "You went after them and beat them up." I offered her a wise smile. "Why would I want to do this? Stop acting like a bully and calling them your friends." Lisa exited Dr. Entered. I was more banged up than anything serious. Our wife swung like a kid on a playground. My arm was sore, but my cracked ribs were not so bad. The pain and difficulty breathing were caused solely by the hit. The following morning, Daniel and Eric picked me up. They were grinning wide, but I told them to calm down. Awry, on the other hand, was in poor shape. He'd be on a liquid diet for a month with his jaw wired shut and his swollen face would take a week to subside. However, one punch broke his collarbone because I wasn't taming. Each punch felt random. There were no charges filed against me because witnesses confirmed Benjamin did it first. I had to take another week off, this time for sick leave. Emma mentioned that Aaron Rivers quit and his pay was sent to his brothers in Aberdeen. Daniels' whereabouts were still unknown. Lisa and I didn't talk much. I ended up sleeping on the sofa every night. I soon removed the arm sling, but my ribs continued to hurt, despite the fact that I could move and breathe normally okay. The Osaka Maru was leaving in for days. I saw my lawyer. The divorce papers were ready set to be served in for days. I left everything to Lisa. She would get the house, but I didn't mind because the bail bond company would take it if I skipped bail. I included my vasectomy paperwork in a recent material count lab report with the divorce papers. I called some friends in Scotland and went to the gym to recover from the 2x4 attack. Jonathan Fields did not want me to leave and promised to keep things quiet as long as possible. I asked him to keep an eye on my sons if necessary. Lisa had stopped going to the gym and her house was falling apart. The laundry was piling up and the entire place looked disorganized. Meals were hastily prepared and conversations lacked energy. It appeared that Lisa was gaining weight again. Everything went downhill in just 4 weeks. The next day the boys gave me my maritime papers. Thrilled, we were all eager to leave. I told them to finish the school year before making any decisions, but I don't think they heard me. I organized everything I needed on the Osaka Maru and obtained a list from the quartermaster for the next morning's sail. After settling into my room on board, I left the ship for the last time. Daniel had left his motorcycle parked at the dock's end. It was an uncomfortable 8-hour drive to Aberdeen. The motorcycle was shaking so much that I couldn't see the odometer, despite the smooth engine and nice weather. I was relieved to finally arrive. My friends found Aaron Rivers and agreed to meet at the Four Crowns. The men's room was at the back, accessible from the outside. I checked inside briefly to notify my friends of my arrival before waiting outside the building. The first two guys were locals, but then Aaron appeared. I heard the door close behind him as he approached the restroom. I grabbed his right arm, as I had with Nicholas, and pressed his head against the stone wall. He stumbled down the alley, scraping his face against the stone. I walked about 50 ft and leaned him against the wall. He was groaning and crying with pain. In the dim street light, I could see that his right eye socket was covered in blood. His cheekbone was visible beneath his eye and the entire side of his face had been scraped dry. "Please don't kill me, Ethan. I apologize. I apologize." He pleaded. I had no intention of ending him, but I saw no reason to tell him. "So here is the deal, Aaron. Tell me the truth about what occurred at the party and you will live. If you lie to me, you're done for, okay? I understand. I'm hurting, Ethan," he whimpered. "I promised you that if you talk, I would get you a doctor. Mitchell became excited when Lisa arrived at the party without you. He boasted about how he would get her drunk and sleep with her. Lisa looked fantastic. Ethan, really. She was dressed up and seemed ready to have a good time. Mitchell kept offering her drinks, saying we could have sloppy seconds. We did not believe he could pull it off. After a while he led her to the storeroom and we followed. Are you sure you want to hear this, Ethan? Yes, keep going, I said firmly. Okay, but please do not hurt me again, Aaron pleaded. We could hear Mitchell and Lisa behind the door getting busy. She was moaning and saying dirty things, just like in adult movies. Simply listening got us all worked up. Finally, Mitchell opened the door. Lisa sat on the couch with one knee up. Her private area was exposed. Her top was down. Her breasts were exposed and she smiled broadly. We all took turns with her, and she even gave BJ. We never hurt Ethan. We never made her do something she didn't want to do. Mitchell and Nicholas were close with her, but Awry and I were not interested. After we finished, we assisted her in getting dressed. She left with Mitchell and I believe they went somewhere before he dropped her off, but I am not sure. I sincerely apologize, Ethan. We did not hurt her, I swear, and we didn't make her do anything. He pleaded that she did not want to do it. I simply stared at him. Do you know where Mitchell Frell is? He shakes his head. No, this guy could not afford to lie to me. His story resembled Demo more than Lisa. His face looked terrible in the dim light. He was bleeding profusely and his eye socket was turning. Black pieces of skin hung from his cheek and the exposed flesh beneath was a vibrant red. I knocked on the pub's locked door, said goodbye to some old friends and got on my bike. A few miles down the road I noticed an ambulance heading toward the pub. I boarded the Osaka Maru in the early morning after parking the motorcycle where I found it. Daniel would pick up the bike later. My first shift was that night, so I spent the rest of the day recovering from my travels. That motorcycle really took a toll on me. I should have taken the car. Several hours later I awoke, showered and ate dinner. My supervisor briefed me on my job responsibilities and then left me to it. It was a relatively easy entry-level position. My co-workers were not particularly friendly or helpful. They would respond to direct questions but provide no guidance, and none seemed interested in making connections. I hoped to form a bond with the crew, but that seemed unlikely. Everyone seemed to be friendly with each other, but I felt excluded. I chose to be patient and waited out. Lisa should have received her divorce papers that morning, and I'm sure Aaron Rivers has already shared his side of the story with the authorities. I could see my son and his friends laughing about the recent events. After my shift I went to bed 2 days later. I was summoned to the captain's office during the daytime. Captain Costa did not appear pleased as I stood before him. "Mr. White, the Royal Navy has requested permission to land a helicopter on the Osaka Maru and transport you back to the mainland. This morning I received a detailed wire justifying my request. I'll summarize some of the details in the extradition request. If there are any inaccuracies, please clarify." He said they want to talk to you about the disappearance of Mitchell Frell. You face charges in connection with Mitchell Frell's disappearance. You are also accused of severely beating a man named Fred Foster, causing him to lose one kidney and possibly another. You stick bail for that charge. You are charged with injuring Benjamin Daniels, initially classified as self-defense but now deemed more severe. Finally, on the night you boarded the ship, you are accused of severely beating a man named Darren Rivers in Aberdeen, causing him to lose his transportation. I'm not sure how you could have been in Aberdeen at the same time, and I do not want to know. It is stated that all of these incidents were carried out with your bare hands in retaliation for a personal offense. Mr. White, do you have any comments, sir? I apologize for any inconvenience I may have caused, particularly regarding the charges. I just wish I'd found Mitchell Farrell. He would have been in the hospital with the other 3. I don't know where that guy is. I'll pack my belongings and be prepared for the helicopter when it arrives. Captain Costa smiled at me and said that will not be necessary. I told him you'd never boarded. There is no Ethan Backer on the Osaka Maru. Now get back to work. I returned to the crew quarters, showered and got ready for my shift by dinner. The police reports had spread throughout the crew. For the remainder of the trip I had more friends than I could manage. I didn't hear from anyone back home for about a month. My lawyer sent me a wire informing me that the divorce was finalized and I was now a free man. Lisa got the same news. However, when I left the country, she lost her house to a bail bond company. Mitchell Farrell was hospitalized with serious injuries and police were searching for Daniel and Eric in connection with the incident. My sons discovered Mitchell and Lisa in our bedroom before the house was reclaimed. Lisa was now living in Oslo with her sister, expecting a child and dealing with weight issues again. I still had pending charges and my lawyer advised me not to return. He had no information about my son's whereabouts. The news left me with mixed emotions. The next morning at breakfast, the captain approached our table and said, "I just wanted to let you know that Daniel and Eric White are not on the camera bound for Cape Town." We both smiled. I've always wanted to live at sea. Here's the next story. My name is Eric Parker and I'm sad to say that today marks the end of my marriage to Claire Hughes. It began with so much promise or story. 15 years ago I worked for a company that distributed pumps and motors. We were the largest company in the tri-state area. However, we do not manufacture the pumps or motors. We distribute them for large manufacturers. The company is doing extremely well and I and my team contribute significantly to their success. Fury Powers, the CEO, believes that having a mechanical engineer on staff along with a machinist or two would greatly benefit the company. I am the engineer. He was correct. Our job was to test the new pumps and motors that the manufacturers were attempting to sell us. We also had to diagnose the problems with the existing lines. Our first success was nearly the end of us. This German company advertised a new super pump for industrial waste applications. The company had a good reputation and was selling these new pumps as quickly as they could make them. We've already done business with Menards for a few samples. The Germans were happy to supply them, but they wanted an exclusive deal in North America. We had 1 week to make a decision or they'd look elsewhere. My team and I had been working together for about 6 months and had some success. For example, one of our popular pumps had a valve problem that only occurred under certain conditions, which we solved with a low-cost, simple valve modification. Gary was overjoyed to date until he dropped his new pump bomb on us. Logically, the pump should have been an obvious choice. The company was German. They clearly understand engineering and have a track record of success. We should just go through the most ions of studying the pump and then sign the exclusive deal. which would double our annual pump sales. However, Gary Powers was no dummy. He had worked his way up from the bottom and would know if we didn't try hard enough, which was our company's cardinal sin. Mistakes due to hard work were acceptable, but not slacking off mistakes resulting from incomplete termination records. We had 3 samples to test. One spent 7 days running through thick debris-filled sludge. We threw a variety of climate conditions at desert heat and dust, including snow and rain. The other one, we tried everything. Just dirt and chemicals. You name it. The pump did not seem to like and combined with sludge in one of the components. I won't bore you with engineering details, but it didn't make me or the team feel warm and fuzzy. So we told Gary not to bite. However, we tested 2 of the new pumps at the same time and the one from it performed better. We suggested that one for the next 6 months. The sales department despised us. The Italian pumps did not sell well, but the German pumps we had rejected were flying off the shelves. Then reports began to come in from the southwest about pump failures. Long story short, the company that signed the deal with the Germans nearly went bankrupt due to recalls, repairs and negative publicity. Our Italian pump sales skyrocketed and the sales department took my team out to dinner working with our advert. I.O. was the least enjoyable aspect of my job. Gary believed I should call, and when our advertising agency pitched a new idea, he didn't want us to be embarrassed by an ad that made too many promises or was technically unrealistic. This made sense, but it was difficult to handle so much at once. The only saving grace was the presence of my usual co-worker, Jeff B. He was a pleasure to work with and a true professional. Still, I didn't like the advertising business. However, you must carry out your responsibilities. This was the case until Jeff brought someone else along who took over our account. He was being promoted and Claire Hughes would be our new attraction. When she walked into a conference room, I was astounded. She actually took my breath away. She wasn't beautiful, nor did she have big tits or long legs. Claire was on the right side of average and certainly not difficult to look at. But she seemed to me to be exactly what I needed in my life. Despite the fact that I don't remember what was said, I managed to get through the meeting without embarrassing myself. I spent the majority of my time looking at her, trying to think of a way to ask her out. I believe Jeff recognized my problem and handed me her business card, telling me to contact her if I had any further feedback on the presentation. I waited until the following day to cover work. She seemed surprised to hear from me, but agreed to go on a date. We dated for 6 months before she realized I genuinely liked her. She couldn't understand why someone like me would want to be with her. This was my introduction to her insecurities. I was just the male equivalent of her, above average but not exceptional. However, she felt she was out of my league and was afraid of being hurt. Before we slept together, she wanted assurance that I would not abandon her right away. CLA desired an exclusive relationship and I had to back up my words with evidence to allay her fears. The fact that I was already exclusive with her was merely words. I could only think of one thing, so I surprised her with an engagement ring and she accepted. This must have been the proof she was searching for. We had a lot of great sex over the next year before the wedding. Life was good. We both worked hard and we soon began talking about having children. That's when her insecurities took over again. It all went wrong at a work Christmas party that year. Claire freaked out when our new administrative assistant arrived, because they usually stayed together at these events. I'll be the first to admit Roxanne is a total babe, but she also has a very attractive husband. Most importantly, she was good at your job, which benefited our team greatly. We got to work and she completed the paperwork. CLA, on the other hand, saw nothing but an impending affair, and the tension was palpable. When we left the party, she jumped on me before the car door. I had prepared for her to close. I took my time walking around to my door, but she didn't stop until we got home and into our bedroom. She stopped ranting at that point and I asked her what I needed to do to earn her trust. She stated that she had no idea there would be no children until she found out. I then suggested that we could still practice. I could express how much I loved her. She was just too worked up, so she waited until the morning. It seemed strange to me that a woman who believes she might cheat on her refuses to have sex with you for this reason. Oh well, and the first, I took advantage of it in the morning and we remained in bed until noon. When she handed me the post-nuptial agreement 2 weeks and 2 days later, I knew she had her answer. Yes, insecurity will achieve this. We covered every aspect of custody, child support and alimony at our house. Not that we owned a house. It is difficult to specify exact amounts, but there were numerous formulas based on percentages of future earnings and the like. The lawyer who reviewed it for me said everything was fine. In fact, if Claire cheated, I would be in a great position to get sole custody and child support. In addition to the post-snap, we would each have a locator app on our phones and we would share passwords for our phones and laptops. Random testing was allowed at any time. Obviously, I signed up and agreed to the phone and laptop ideas. I had no intention of cheating on her. I'm leaving her. I adore the woman and, after 3 years, we welcomed Leslie and the twins. Max and Mark CLA returned to work as quickly as possible to continue her climb up the corporate ladder. It should come as no surprise that she was concerned about her position and future advancement. But she did have the children, which I am grateful for. I better be. Because I was to be the primary caregiver, we never discussed it. But she enjoyed her job and aspired to advance. I've already accepted that I'm second in command at her job. However, I also checked her phone and laptop for any unusual activity. I would always check her locator app to see when she worked late. I must admit I was a little suspicious. She may attempt to advance at work by screwing her way to the top. This was definitely not the case. Her boss, Jeff, told me about one social event where my wife had betrayed him serious. It was better than ice queen, which essentially meant the same thing. She was constantly working. She didn't have any friends at work. She didn't flirt and was completely focused on being the best. People respected her work ethic but were put off by her cold demeanor. Guys picked up on her violent. Unless they worked with her, they avoided her. There were plenty more willing women in the company. Then came the second wave of insecurity in our marriage. Claire, from the start, desired separate finances. When we had a joint account, we contributed 50/50 that's for household expenses and the rest was none of the other person's business. If I wanted to take her out, I paid vacations were split 50/50. However, as time passed, she developed an aversion to vacations. She might not be at the top of the list for the next promotion if she weren't always present. This wasn't a big deal when the kids were younger, but it became a problem as they grew older. However, first the second explosion and then we can discuss vacations. I wanted to start my own company called Motor Company. I had a few ideas that I had been working on in my home shop and wanted to take them further. First, I tried to persuade Gary to start manufacturing. Gary, whom I enjoyed working for, was about to retire and his son was going to take over Andrew. Howard does not like our team at all. Our suppliers had treated him well enough that he wanted to get rid of us. We posed to many questions and rejected to many new models. So we had to leave his father. Gary and I had a heart-to-heart when I approached him about starting our own product. I expected him to be enthusiastic about the idea, but by the end of our conversation he had advised me to take my team and strike out on my own. He would give us a guaranteed 3-year exclusive contract to continue doing what we were doing to help us establish ourselves. He was planning to retire in 3 years and he knew his son wanted access. We'd be on our own either way. Perhaps we could even sell them pumps and motors. But that is up to Andrew. What an incredible opportunity. And I could not wait to get home and tell Claire that didn't go well. This is an understatement. How could I do this to her? How would we pay for her home? We had a mortgage. Now she was clear that she would not support or bail me out. What she was really telling me was that she was extremely insecure. My idea would fail, leaving us penniless. I needed to make my monthly payment or else. Well, whatever else you may be wondering. It didn't take me long to find out. Post-snap number 2 or the addendum to the first appeared exactly 1 week later. A financial agreement for the marriage was now set in stone. Money in any form was untouchable to me. As a result, my money in my new business was untouchable. The joint bank account payment was to be made every month. There are no excuses, medical or otherwise. Basically, she was convinced that my business would fail and that if I couldn't meet my obligations, I would go bankrupt and be out until I could. CLA had refused to listen to me about my guaranteed contract or the patents I was filing for my ideas. She wanted financial security, period. I was obviously dissatisfied with CLA's lack of support in part too. But, as you might expect, my lawyer couldn't believe she would sign it. He and the other lawyers at his firm were aware of my business plan and calculated that if anything went wrong and we divorced, she would receive nothing except, of course, for the piano Part 1 layout. So I signed it despite her lack of trust in me. But I love her and I was not concerned about money or infidelity. You could say, I felt pretty secure. My company grew quickly and we were soon manufacturing pumps and motors and employing 50 people. Roxanne was still with me, as was Michael. I couldn't manage the startup and my children's needs without her. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy their sports and school events. But she helped me pull it off. CLA, of course, had been promoted again and was now spending an increasing amount of time at work. There was a problem, however. We never had family vacations. Claire did not take any days off. She figured that if she missed the day, she would miss something and get in trouble worse than a negative performance assessment. Yes, I suspected there was more to it and kept an eye on her, even hiring a PI for a week. However, all she did was work. The PI even gave me a discount because CLA only worked and came home. Previously, vacations consisted of just me and the kids. We went camping to the lake, the beach, the mountains, and to my parents' house, where we once stayed. CLA remained at work. I mean at home. It all came to a head. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. When Leslie Mark was granted access to Disneyland, they asked and I said yes. That was a good idea. They were getting to the age where they could really have fun there. Leslie was 9 and the twins were 7. They wanted to know when we could go and if Mom would join us. I told them we could go on their school's spring break, but they needed to ask their mom first. I texted Sinclair right away, warning her what was in store for her when she returned home. CLA was a workaholic who almost always made it home for dinner. She would do her best to engage everyone, and then we'd clean up the dishes with the kids while I made dinner. I went to work early and left at 4 p.m. to spend time with the kids and prepare dinner. She usually took her laptop and returned to work on our sofa at the kitchen table, depending on where it was. We didn't have to wait long after the kids went to bed. We have sex quite frequently, perhaps 2 or 3 times per week, with Sunday usually being the best day. CLA returned home from work that night and the kids were clamoring for information about Disneyland. She wasn't very pleased. She gave them a variety of excuses, but it was all ruse because she didn't want to leave work for a week. That night I told her that I really wanted her to come. I would pay for everything, and if not, we would leave without her. She was a little upset that I was paying for everything, so I quickly agreed to pay half. When she arrived after 2 days of the children bugging her about it, I gave her a week to decide, claiming it was due to a flight seat sale. She reluctantly agrees. Leslie, Mark, Max and I were very happy. We were content, at least until we arrived on Monday of spring break and decided to relax and go to the beach. Claire said she was just going to check something and catch up with us. We didn't see her until we returned to our hotel for supper. Then on Tuesday it was off to Universal Studios, where CLA begged Fatchu to leave after everyone had fallen asleep the night I had booked. CLA took it home. When she awoke the next morning, the 4 of us were preparing to go to Disneyland. Claire was not as excited as the kids were. She explained that she only needed the morning and would join us after lunch. That's when I gave her the ticket and told her to go home and get back to work. She was very upset and I told her that we were supposed to be on vacation and she could make up her mind to work for us. We were leaving in 5 minutes. with or without her. She joined us and had a good time, but she would never go on holiday with us again. Life went on and my company expanded to 150 employees. I never mentioned it to Claire, though she thought she earned more money than I did, which made her feel better about herself. CLE referred to my company as my pump and motor shop as if it were a small storefront repair shop or something. If I started talking about my company and our millions of dollars in sales, I figured she'd feel insecure. Claire appeared to be at ease with me in her home life right now, which was satisfactory to me. She was not, however, confident at work. There were 4 people ahead of her at work and she wished there was only one. Albert Morris, the owner and CEO, was an unattainable position for her, but she could aspire to 3 V positions. One in particular she desired. There were 3 VPs, Administration, Operations, and Creative. CLA wanted to be the Vice President of Creative, so badly that she could taste it. However, Jeff Burns, the current holder of that position, was still relatively young and had served as a mentor and patron. As she rose through the ranks of the company, she would accept one of the other positions and put in extra effort to understand everything they were doing. The VP of Operations was a company veteran who respected CLA and expected her to take over Jeff's position when he retired. The Vice President of Administration was new. His name was Charles Chuck Adams. He was new to the company and figured he could crack Madame Sirius's code. She was a babe in his eyes, and since he enjoyed the challenge, she was going to make a serious run away from her. He knew she wanted the promotion and that would serve as the foundation for seduction. CLA should understand that Albert Morse would make the decision with little input from the other VP. However, he was aware that she was insecure and he could exploit this vulnerability. Albert informed the other VP in late November that Jeff would be retiring, but that he did not want to say anything until the Christmas party in December. Chuck immediately started working on CLA. He made sure that when he saw her again, he casually mentioned her excellent work and how she should be VP for the remainder of the time before the Christmas party. He made it a point to imply or make subtle innuendos that the other VP had influence over promotions. He also made it a point to inform Claire that the company needed new blood, so the next VP would most likely come from outside the firm as he had. Chuck's plan was clearly working. Claire was in a state she knew deep down that Albert would make the decision if and when there was an opening in the VP ranks. She also understood that if Jeff retired, he would recommend her. Jeff had told her so, and after 5 other promotions, she trusted him. Nonetheless, she couldn't shake the feeling that her efforts would be insufficient. It made sense that the next VP, like Chuck, would come from outside. Claire, of course, had no idea what was going to happen at the Christmas party, but she was much more vulnerable to Chuck's plan by that point. Her insecurities were still surfacing. Eric wasn't looking forward to Claire's Christmas party. However, every year it was the same. Claire served as the party's organizer, making general supervisor. This happened when I was in the 1st or 2nd year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Combined with her usual business-first approach, meant Eve would be on his own for the evening. She'd see him at dinner alongside boring men, while she sat with the most important clients, who were always invited. She'd then spend the rest of the evening working in some capacity while he'd stand at the bar and drink with Jeff. When a new hire woman, who had previously served someone who did not like Madame Sirius, invited him to dance, he'd politely refuse once he made the mistake of dancing with another woman, which did not go well, and they would go home late, leaving her exhausted. This happened when I was in the 1st or 2nd year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Eric had enough, and as they drove to the party, he spoke briefly with CLA. He said, "Listen, CLA, I'm tired of doing the same thing every year at your Christmas party." She responded, "What do you mean?" "It's simple. I'm not going to spend another party board, and only if you ignore me or mightn't refuse to give me even one dance. I'm leaving." She was so preoccupied with the details of the party and her role in it that she simply agreed with him. effectively dismissing him. Eric knew he'd be leaving early, and that's what happened. He did, however, have an interesting and disturbing conversation with Jeff before leaving. Of course, after dinner and the traditional CEO speech, the party was abuzz with the announcement that Jeff would be retiring in the coming year. Eric inquired with Jeff about it and discovered some fascinating information. First and foremost, Jeff was 60 years old and wanted to travel with his wife. They had a lot of money and wanted to spend it before they could. Then came the fascinating part. Jeff suspected CLA would do something stupid to secure his promotion. He had overheard Chuck speaking with her, instilling doubt in Claire's mind that her incredible hard work, skills and experience would be insufficient. Jeff was intimately familiar with Claire's unwavering commitment to her work and her insecurities. CLA had even told him about her Disneyland trip, which caused her so much internal conflict she could not do it again. Eric also discovered CLA's work nickname. At the time he knew she was all about work because he checked on her and she hadn't done anything suspicious in all these years. However, he was unaware of the Madame Serious moniker and how many men she had turned down, including co-workers and clients. It was disturbing to learn that this Chuck was going to go after his wife. It didn't help that Claire appeared to be preoccupied with talking with one person in particular this night. Sure, she was busy running the party, but she kept returning to one particular man who was younger than Claire and Eric and clearly attractive. This guy was clearly aware of it. Eric asked Jeff who it was and was not surprised to learn it was Chuck, the Vice President of Administration. It was almost 10 p.m. for the person he was warning Eric about. Eric had drunk enough, which wasn't much, and had turned down a couple of dances. He decided it was time to leave, but he wanted to give CLA a chance. So he began walking in her direction as he approached her, and Chuck CLA noticed he was approaching and didn't want him to interrupt their conversation. She was asking Chuck for information on how to get the V position and he was talking freely. Claire knew Eric wanted to dance with her, but she was preoccupied with work, so she made eye contact with him before quickly turning her back on him. Eric was no dummy and he took the insults as it was. He turned around to leave. Claire didn't notice for obvious reasons, and she was far too preoccupied for the rest of the night to miss him. It was only 1 p.m. when the party was about to end. She realized Eric wasn't there. She asked Chef, who was still present, if he had seen Eric and was dissatisfied with his response. He told me that if I didn't dance with him, he would leave. He told me that he told you this, and when you refused to dance with him, he left. CLA was embarrassed. But vaguely remembered Eric saying something similar. But she was also upset because he was not supporting her work. She was focused on Chuck and her promotion. How could he have done this? So her frustration grew as she waited for a taxi to take her home. She had built up a lot of steam by the time she walked through the door. She stormed into Eric's bedroom and woke him up with a loud noise. How could you simply leave? I was so embarrassed that you left without saying goodbye. You claimed to support my work, but you left me hanging when I needed it. How could you? Eric was awake and had enough. Listen, CLA. I warned you that if you ignored me all night, I would leave when I only wanted to dance. How do you think I feel when you turn your back on me for the company of another man? This is a stunt, Claire. Manly was the tone unusual for Eric, but there was an implication that she preferred another man over him. Eric continued. I can't dance with anyone, but you refused to dance with me. I respect that and do not look at the women you work with. But for you to be more interested in Chuck than in me is too much. I have helped you at home and in every way I could think of. I am proud of your professional success. I've told you several times and done everything you've requested. However, I am occasionally frustrated that we do not take vacations together, despite the fact that work is clearly the most important aspect of your life. Now I'm going back to sleep. CLA left the room and went downstairs to consider what Eric had said. After much thought and reflection, she realized Eric was correct and she would change. She only needed to get the VP promotion. Then she could relax and focus more on Eric and the kids. It was nearly 7 a.m. when she realized this. so she joined Eric in bed. Claire also made sure he had a good morning by waking him up with a blue chip and some tender love. She made an effort to spend quality time with her husband and children during the Christmas season. Then the new year was over, and it was back to serious work. Chuck ramped up his campaign. Now that the news was out and Claire Albert announced that applications were being accepted, with interviews beginning in February. They hoped to have the new VP in place by April. Claire, Jeff's wife, was applying, and her response was to provide him with the completed application form and an updated CV. Jeff did his best to explain that Albert would make the decision, and Jeff backed her camp Casey. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could tell CLA was extremely concerned about her chances. Chuck, of course, was the primary source of these insecurities. Eric's parents' wedding anniversary was on February 10th, and Eric and the kids would usually come to visit for the weekend to celebrate with him. CLA had not come in the previous 11 years, so Eric was not surprised that she would not come this time. His parents lived for hours across the state line, so they typically left after school on Friday and returned Sunday afternoon. Eric asked CLA again, but she said she couldn't go because she had a big meeting with the client that Friday. Chuck kept his maneuvering on CLA. He started making sexual innuendos and flirting. CLA was becoming increasingly anxious. Every day, she would be the first to arrive at the receptionist's desk. When the maid arrived, she would try to subtly ask Sherry and HR how many applications had come in. Sherry worked directly for Chuck, and she made certain to inflate the number of outside applicants and their qualifications. Sherry then passes this along to CLA, unintentionally aiding in her seduction. Chuck was spending so much time at work with Claire that he found out on Monday that Eric was leaving with his kids for the weekend. Conveniently, his own wife, Tourette's, was going to see her twin brother, Mike, the same weekend, so his wife lived about an hour away, and CLE always followed the same routine. She left Friday afternoon and stayed the night, returning Saturday evening, closing doors as only twins can. And this happened about every other month. Chuck couldn't believe his good fortune. After the week-long full-court press, Chuck made sure to inform Sherry on Friday morning about his top candidate for the position of VP, who had just submitted a resume. Chuck made his move once he knew Sherry had spoken with Claire. At 4 p.m. he entered her office and inquired about CLA's dinner plans. She replied, "I'm just going to go home and have some leftovers. When I'm done, why don't we go out for a bite to eat? We could then work on a strategy to help you get the promotion you deserve so much." Claire thought about it. Eric and the kids were gone, but she still needed to eat. "Sure. How about we leave at 6? She responded to. Chuck felt elated. "I'll reserve a table at a good restaurant. I'll see you in the parking lot at 6. Claire spent the next 2 hours unable to work. She couldn't stop thinking about all of the candidates for the coveted VP position and how she could ensure she was the one who got it by almost 6 p.m. She was completely stressed out. Then she got a text from her husband. "Eric, I hope the big meeting went well. Do you have any plans for tonight?" CLA considered a response. She didn't want to lie, but she also couldn't tell him she was going out with Chuck. She replied that the meeting was a success, going out for drinks to celebrate with some coworkers. Eric was surprised by this unusual behavior. "I am serious," he replied. "Have a great time. I miss you." Claire was surprised at how easy the lie had been, but she rationalized. This was a major promotion, so everything was for a good cause. Eric would be proud of her. Eric assumed CLA would be heading across the street from her office for drinks at Dino's bar. He decided to check his locator app at 6:30 and discovered she was not at that bar instead of Dinjo's as an upscale restaurant. He couldn't believe she'd lied to him. Claire and Eric had visited Dan Jones several times, but he couldn't recall whether it had a bar or not. He continued to use the location app. Around 90 apps indicated that CLA was now at the Skylab, the city's hottest club. Eric did not want to become too paranoid. CLA needed dinner, so they went out for food first, followed by drinks. It was still unusual behavior for CLA, so he logged onto the Skycam after his parents and children went to bed. His perk was Skylab's catchy gimmick, which had helped it become the city's most popular club. Claire had designed it as part of a marketing campaign displayed above the DJ. The Skycam show takes place on the dance floor, directly in front of the DJ. The camera moved slowly back and forth. Privacy concerns were addressed with a notice at the club's entrance and a sign on the DJ booth. Local celebrities were encouraged to appear on the Skycam, which was, of course, live stream. The Skylab also clearly had a highlight reel of the top celebrities who had attended the club. It was a popular feature, but it only covered about a quarter of the dance floor, making it easy for people to be out of sight. Eric had been watching for about 15 minutes when, much to his dismay, his wife none other than Chuck danced by Eric before taking a deep breath and attempting to relax. It was all very explainable, but Eric began to reckon. What he was watching was among the group of co-workers who were simply having some innocent fun. You can't need to watch and look closely for other characters from Claire's work. Eric didn't recognize anyone until he saw them again. He noticed CLA dancing with Chuck. However, this time it was a slow song and they were dancing far too close for Eric's liking. Chuck was all over her and she didn't resist. Actually, she appeared to be giving as good as she received with the song and declaration, and Chuck was still in focus on the camera's edge of view. Eric knew they were kissing. Eric then went into his photo gallery and found the emergency contact list from Claire's work which he had photographed. He dialed Chuck's wife's door number. She answered the third ring. Hello. Is this the store settings? Yes, it is. How did you obtain this number? She responded, It's Eric Baker. I am the husband of Claire Hughes, who works alongside your husband, Chuck. I am calling because right now your husband and my wife are at the Skylab doing things that will not pass the spouse test. Eric heard an intake of breath and Doris responded, That bastard. I give him another chance and here's what he does to me. What are you planning to do? Eric quickly explained, I intend to divorce her. Of course it's a long story and I won't bore you with the specifics, but there is no other option. However, there is a problem. I'm tracking her with our locator app to see when they'll return to my house or hotel. However, I am 4 hours away and will be unable to catch them in the act. Doris met Eric and was very pleased with her response. I'm not at home tonight, so they may also visit my house. Listen. I'm only an hour away with my brother Mike, who I may use to test. Chuck. We can leave now and by the time we return to town you can tell us where they are, so we can surprise them. Eric was extremely happy. This sounds like a plan. I'll send you a recording of their antics at the Skylab and I'd appreciate it if you could send me anything you get from surprising them. Doris confirmed that they were on their way and Eric continued to monitor the sky cam in his locator. Helen Claire was on her way within half an hour. She was on her way to a residence other than Eric's, so it must be Adam's home. Eric texted Doris the information. Meanwhile, Claire was in no pain and extremely horny. Alcohol and attractive men did that to her. She couldn't wait to get into bed with Chuck and complete the deal that would secure her promotion. There were no thoughts of consequences, just results, and she was desperate for them. CLA awoke from her post-coast slumber dozing off. She was still pretty drunk, but it dawned on her that she had cheated on Eric. Yes, there was a valid reason, but it was still cheating. She figured she should go home. Chuck, on the other hand, arrived around the same time and asked for a round two. Claire gave in to his persuasions and when Dawson arrived she was on top of Chuck riding his clock. Mike ensured he had plenty of video footage of the lovers. Before moving on to the next scene, CLA realized someone was pulling on her hair. Chuck snaps. The same person slapped CLA hard in the face and then backhanded her. Unfortunately for CLA, Dawson's ring finger was used for the backhand and her wedding ring caused a gash on her cheek. Get the duck out of my house, you poor filter, she said, as she dragged CLA away. Chuck moves towards the door. CLA shook herself free, grabbed her clothes and fled for her life. Doris slipped back to see what Mike was doing to her husband. Chuck was doubled over and in pain on the floor beside Teet. Mike was constantly kicking him in the groin. Claire dressed in her car. Before heading to the emergency room at the hospital, she ended up getting 3 stitches. The gash was too large for the clear tube. She drove home and dragged herself into the bedroom, crying the entire way. How could she explain the gash on her? Chuck to Eric and Dora. Still, Eric, what happened? How could she have done such a stupid thing? With these questions running through her mind, she fell asleep. Meanwhile, Eric was preoccupied receiving the video from Doris. He had work to do. The first was an email to his lawyer requesting that he forward the following information to his firm's top divorce lawyer. The attachments included both post photos, Skycam footage and footage from Doris. He also included a log of all the events CLA had missed for the children, just in case she wanted to fight custody. After all the insecurities she'd experienced, there was no way. Divorce was not an option. He then texted CLA explaining that he and the kids would be home on Monday rather than Sunday. This would allow Eric to change the locks on the house and possibly serve her at work that day. He didn't have to worry about moving any money because it was already kept separate. CLA awoke with a hangover and assumed she had a bad dream until she touched her cheek and realized it wasn't a dream. It was a nightmare. Looking at her phone, she read Eric's text. She now had more time to develop her story. She wasn't sure whether to contact Chuck or not. He resolved the issue by showing up at her house after lunch on Saturday. Chuck, what are you doing here? She asked. I'm no longer welcome in my home. So I came here. Chuck responded. So you can't stay. What will our neighbor say? She quickly added. Do you think Doris will tell my Eric? I'm pretty sure she already has. I passed out when I heard my kidnet talking after they were done kicking me. In fact, I believe Eric was the one who told Doris. Then it hit CLA, the locator app she insisted on. Eric must have used it to locate her dental doors. Claire felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over her and slammed the door in Chuck's face. Monday morning arrived and CLA reported to work. What else could she do? She used makeup to lessen the impact on her. Chuck, and went to work. Everything was normal until 1 p.m. when a young man she didn't recognize appeared at her office door. Are you Claire Hughes? She asked. Yes, I am. CLA replied. You had been served, he said, passing her an envelope. He took a picture and then left. CLA's world collapsed. Meanwhile, Eric was changing the locks on his home. He had explained what would happen. When he drove the kids home from his parents, he knew that staying at school was not an option. So they sat in their rooms reflecting on their parents' marriage dissolution. Claire finally gathered the courage to call. Eric answered the second ring. Yes, Claire. Eric, I've made a terrible mistake and need to talk to you about it, she responded. You were certainly correct about the mistake. After all, the post captures 13 years, 3 children, and all of my love. You made a horrible mistake. You destroyed our marriage. This is the last time I will speak to you. Until the divorce is finalized, I will enforce all of the terms of the post snaps. If you fight me, I'll bury you. Simply sign the divorce. Then you can spend more time with your true love, without worrying about us interfering with your work. You've hung up. Claire broke down in tears. Her insecurities had ruined her life. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.